Hello everyone, this is going to be a simple tutorial on how to make an FPS controller in Godot, and it was made to be beginner friendly so you can follow along if you haven't touched Godot before. So with that being said, this is Code at All, and please enjoy the tutorial. Okay, so once you've opened up Godot, you want to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to call this Realistic Flashlight, and I'm going to create the folder for it, and then press create and edit. So once you open up your project for the first time, this is going to be what you're going to be seeing. And if you're coming from a game engine like Unity, it's very similar to that. So you basically have your scene view here in the center, and you have your inspector on the right, and your hierarchy tab is going to be the scene tab on the left, and you have your assets down here in the file system. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to create a root node, and for that I'm going to create a 3D scene. I'm going to press F2 to rename this to world. This is going to be our parent node, and all of our other nodes are going to be children of this node. Now after that, what I'm going to do is to add a ground for our player to walk on. And for that, what you can do is to click on this plus icon here and search for static and select static body 3D. I'm going to press create, and when you create that for the first time, it's going to give you a warning, and if you click on that, it's going to say this node has no shape, so it can't collide or interact with other objects. Basically, you need to add another node as a child of this node that's going to define its shape. So you want to make sure you have this node selected and press the add icon again. And what you want to do is to search for collision, and under node 3D you want to select collision shape 3D. This is going to provide us a shape for our static body. So on the inspector tab, what you want to do is to select a shape from these options here. I'm just simply gonna select box shape 3D. And now as you can see, we have a cube shape here that our player can collide with it. Now I'm gonna press on this box shape again to bring down the size menu, and I'm just gonna increase its size on the X and Z axis so it's a bit larger and we can walk on. Now after that, what you want to do is to add a mesh so we can actually see this when you play the game, because right now this is just a placeholder for us to see the collider. This is not going to be actually in the game. So again, you need to select the static body 3D and add another node. This time it's going to be a mesh instance. Select mesh instance 3D, hit create, and when you create that, on the inspector tab you want to go ahead and on the mesh option here, you want to click that and new box mesh. And same thing with this one, you need to click on this cube, and on the size options here you want to increase its size on the X and Z axis so we have a nice floor. Now we're done with the level. Let's go ahead and create our player. And I'm actually gonna rename this by pressing F2 to ground, and I'm just gonna press this little arrow here to collapse it. And you want to select the world node again, because remember this is our parent node, and you want to add another node, and this time this is going to be called a character body 3D, and you want to press create. And this is a node specifically made for us to create a player with it, and to make it a little bit easier for us to code our player. So right now you can see there's a warning icon here, and if you click on that it says there's no shape. So the same thing applies here. What you want to do is to add another node, and this time it's going to be a collision shape 3D. You want to select the shape. This time I'm going to select a capsule shape. And as you can see, we have our shape here. Now I'm going to bring my player a little bit higher so we can see it better. Just so we can see this a little bit better, what I'm going to do is to add another mesh instance. You don't have to do this, but this is just so we can see it better on our editor. So on the mesh, I'm just going to select a capsule mesh. And now you can see this is kind of representing the shape of our player. Again, you do not have to add the mesh. It's just so we can see this better. Okay, so now I'm going to rename this to player and collapse it. So now what we want to do is to create a script. And to do that, what you want to do is to come up to your scene tab, and with your player selected, what you want to do is to click this attach a new or existing script to the selected node. So you want to click that. And when you click that, there's going to be a window here that is going to let you select different options that you can have with your script, where you want to save it, the name of the script, and all of that. So what you want to do is you want to uncheck this template here because we want to write this script from scratch. And down in the path, what you want to do is to click this folder icon here, and you want to create a new folder. I'm going to call this scripts, press open, and press create. So what that does is it's going to create a new script for us. As you can see, this is an empty script. And this is going to be in the script tab. Up here, you can switch between 3D and script. And also, what I would like to do is to press this little icon here to make this a separate window, so I can also make it full screen and make it easier to see and to work on. Now back on Godot, you can see that there's a script icon next to this player, and that means that there's a script attached to this node. And if you click that, you're also going to be moved to the script window. So what you want to do here is to create a new method, and the way you do that is by typing func and then press space underscore process, and it's going to have a parameter called delta, which is going to be the time since the last frame. And so this method is going to be called every frame. Depending on your hardware, you might have different frame rates, so what you want to do is to use delta to make sure there's no difference between devices. Now, first thing I'm going to do is actually come up here, and the way you define variables in GDScript is by typing var and then press space and then the name of the variable. In this case, it's going to be player speed equals to something like 5. Now, we also need another variable. This is going to be called var direction. So this is going to be a vector3. So I'm just going to assign this to vector3.0 as a placeholder. So a vector3 is just a variable that holds 3 numbers representing the x, y, and z axis. So you can think of this as the position of your player, or the speed, scale, rotation, whatever you can come up with. It doesn't have to be any of those, but that's basically what you use this for. In this case, we're just using this as a direction, basically an arrow pointing to which direction that we want to move. Now, if you want to be able to change this player speed in your editor, you want to add export in the beginning of your variable. So if you go back to Godot, if you actually get rid of the error, I'm just going to call pass here, and I'm going to press Control S. And first off, you want to save the scene. I'm going to create a new folder, call this scenes, press save. And now if you click on your player, you can see we have a player speed spot here. Now after that, the next step would be to get the input of the player. And you could go ahead and check for each key yourself, but the easier way to do that is to create actions. And to do that, you want to go back to Godot, and on the project, you you want to click project settings, and on the input map, you want to create some actions. And I'm just going to call these left, press enter, and there's going to be this add icon here. You want to press that. And basically for left, we want to move left when we press A on our keyboard. So I'm just going to type A here. And if you go down here, you can see there's an A here, physical key code, and you want to press OK. Same thing with right. Press D, OK. Forward, add, W, backward, S. And also we want a button for jump, so I'm just going to call this jump. Press add, press space. Now in the process method, what you want to do is to assign the direction to the input of the player. And to get the input of the player, you want to type input.getAxis. And getAxis takes two parameters. The first one is going to be the negative axis, and the second one is the positive one. So you can think of this as a number. This is basically just going to return a number from -1 to +1. So the -1 button is going to be left, and the +1 is going to be right. And these are the actions that we just defined in the input map. And so you want to convert this value to a vector 3, and the easiest way to do that is to multiply it by vector 3 dot right. And vector 3 dot right is basically another way of saying vector 3 1 0 0. So you could do this instead, but this is, in my opinion, better and clean. So that's left and right, but we also need to move forward and backward. And to do that, you want to add this to input.getAxis, backward for the negative action, comma, forward for the positive. And the same thing here, you want to multiply this by vector 3, but this time forward. And vector 3 dot forward is basically another way of saying vector 3 0 0 1. And from now on, this is going to be really simple. And there's actually a property inside this character body 3D class, and it's called velocity. And what you want to do is to assign the velocity to the direction times player speed. And what I would also like to do is to normalize this direction so that our player can't move faster diagonally. And finally, at the end of this process method, what you want to do is to call a method that is called move and slide. So when you call this, it's basically going to take this velocity and try to move the player. Now, if you press Ctrl and S, you're going to be back in Godot, and you can press this play icon up here to play this scene, and this is going to tell you what scene you want to play, and there's no main scene selected. You can just simply say select current. Now you can see there's a window here, and there's just nothing here, and that's because we haven't added a camera to this scene. So what you want to do is to go to your player, and with the player selected, you want to add a node. I'm going to add a node 3D, and I'm going to rename this to head. And under the head, I'm going to add a camera. Now we have a camera, but what I'm going to do is to bring the head a little bit higher. And with the camera selected, you can press preview here to see what the game is going to look like. And when you're happy with that, you can press play again. And now you can see, we can see things better, but there's no lighting here, and the lighting is quite different to what we have here in the scene. And that's because we have this option enabled here, which is going to simulate as sunlight. So you want to turn that off, and now this is going to be the view you're going to be seeing in the game. So what you want to do is to select the world and add a directional light that is going to act as our sun. You want to rotate it down a little bit so it's pointing towards our level. And now if you press play, you can see we have our level lit and ready. So now if I press WASD keys, you can see I can move around. And that's pretty much it for the movement controller. We can't jump, of course, and we can't look around. So let's figure out how to do that. So back in the code, what I'm going to do is to implement the jumping functionality. And I'm going to create an if statement. So you want to type if input is action just pressed, and we call this action jump in the input map, and is on floor. Now this is a method that is already made for us inside the character body 3D class, so we don't have to deal with all of that. And make sure you add a colon at the end of your if statement, and then you want to press enter. And what you want to do is to actually come up here and create another variable and call this jump force. And then down here you want to type velocity dot y plus equals to jump force. Now if you saved it and got back to Godot, press play, you can see if you press space, you can't jump, and that's because we aren't on the floor. And that's because we don't have a gravity. So to code the gravity, you want to create a new variable and call this gravity. I'm going to assign it to like 8. And you want to come down here and type else colon new line velocity dot y minus equals gravity multiplied by delta, so we keep it consistent across all of the devices. Now if you just played this right now, this wouldn't really work. As you can see, there's no gravity, and the reason for that, you can see here we're kind of setting this velocity to this direction. You can see we are subtracting the gravity from the velocity, but at the start of the next frame, so we're kind of overriding it. So to fix that, what you want to do is to add this to velocity.y, so we're not overriding it. And this will give us an error if you run this. So what you want to do is to multiply this by vector3.up. So now if you save this and play this again, you can see I can jump and I have gravity. And I can only jump once in the air. So that's already looking good. Now at the moment we can move around and jump, but we can't look around. So let's implement that. Now the easiest way to do that is to go inside this method that is called input, and this is going to be called every time there's a input. Inside here, what you want to do is to make sure that the input is the movement of the mouse and nothing else. And to check that, what you want to do is type if event is input event mouse motion. So now that you're certain that the event is a mouse motion, what you want to do is to rotate the camera, right? You see, we need to rotate the head on the y-axis and the camera on the x-axis, because if you try to do both on the same node, you're gonna get some dizzy effects. So what you want to do is to get access to the head and the camera inside your code. And to do that, what you want to do is to come up here and type unready. And this is just going to make sure that we're not going to access the nodes unless they're ready. So type var, and I'm just going to call this head. And what you want to type here is to type $, and this is going to access the children of the current node, and it's going to be called head. So for the camera, I'm just going to type unready var camera head / camera 3D. Now back in the input event, what you want to do is to rotate the head on the y-axis. So you want to type head dot rotate y. And first of all, I'm actually going to create another variable, call this mouse sensitivity, and assign it to something like 0.5. And here what you want to do is to access the relative position of the mouse. So to access that, you want to type event.relative.x, and you want to multiply this by mouse sensitivity. And finally, you want to convert all of this to radians, and there's a method for that called dec to rad. And so if you save this and played it, you can see I can look around, but it's kind of inverted at the moment. So you want to add a minus here, and now you can see we can move around fine. Now for the next step, it's kind of different, because if you think about it, for the camera, you want to limit the rotation angle to 90 degree and negative 90 degrees. Because if I just did the same for the camera, you can see that there's going to be a problem. So you can see I've duplicated the same thing we've done for head for the camera, but I've just changed the relative to y and rotation on the x-axis. And if we ran this, you can see I can look around fine, but if I keep looking up, I can rotate endlessly, and that's not what we want. So to limit that, you actually need to create another variable, call this camera x angle. And instead of rotating the camera directly, you want to add to this value. So you want to copy this part, put it here, and then there's going to be a method called clamp. Is the first parameter. You want to pass it the camera x angle, and you want to clamp this between negative 90 degrees and positive 90 degrees. Okay, so this is going to make sure that the camera x angle is going to stay between these values. And finally, you want to type camera.rotation.x equals to camera x angle, but make sure to convert it to radians before, and also put a minus here. Now if you jump back to Godot, you can see I can look around, and if I keep scrolling up, I can't go above the limit. Okay, so that's already looking good. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is inside the ready method, and this method is going to be called when the node and the children of it are ready. What I'm going to do here is to capture the cursor, and to do that, you want to type input.setMouseMode input.mouseMode captured. And on the input, we also want to type else if event is input event key, and if input dot is key pressed, key escape. So if you press the escape key, we want to release the cursor so we can exit the game. Mouse mode, input dot mouse mode visible. So what this is going to do is when we play the game, it's going to capture our mouse, and when we want to exit the game, we want to press escape, and that's going to make our cursor visible again. So if you play this again, you can see my cursor is not visible. I can move around, and if I press escape, I can close the game. So at the moment, as you can see, I've added these cubes in this scene so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. And as you can see, I can jump around and look around fine. But if I try to look any other direction other than forward and pressed forward, you can see I'm not moving towards that direction. And the reason for that is because if we go back to our code, you can see down here, we're multiplying the input of the player to the vector3.right, and vector3.right is a fixed value. So you want to replace that with the direction that the player is looking. And to get that, you want to access head and dot basis dot x. And if you've done any coding in Unity, this is basically just saying transform.right. So this is not a float, this is a vector3, and it's basically the direction of the player's x-axis. So you want to do the same thing with forward, except this time it's going to be head.basis.z. So if you save this and played it, you can see it's kind of working, but the backward and forward buttons are reversed. And to fix that, what you want to do is to swap these values. So forward for the negative input and backward for the positive input. And now if you play this, you can see I'm moving towards where I'm looking. And if I try to look up and press forward, you can see I'm still on the ground. And that's because we are getting the heads transform and not the cameras transform. So that's important. So that's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video, sharing it with your friends. It's gonna really help the channel. And until the next tutorial, I will see y'all soon.